The strongest cadet in the entire academy has never lost a fight. But today, a human girl ended his career with one punch. I have been an instructor at the Valorian Military Academy for 12 cycles now, and I thought I had seen everything. Absolutely everything. Cadets who could bench press a hover tank. Cadets who could calculate orbital trajectories in their sleep. Cadets so arrogant they practically needed their own gravity well just to contain their egos. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on the third day of the autumn term. My name is Thex Vormund and I am what you would call a Krellian. 4 arms, chitinous plates running down my spine and a lovely shade of deep violet that my mate says brings out my eyes. All 6 of them. I run Combat Wing 7 at the Academy, which is a fancy way of saying I get to watch the most elite, most decorated, most insufferably proud cadets in the entire Galactic Coalition beat each other senseless in the name of tactical training. The morning started like any other morning, badly. The training wing at Valorian is not some quaint little gymnasium. Oh no, we are talking about a facility that spans 3 square kilometers, with gravity adjustment chambers, atmospheric simulators, and enough weapons to start a small war, which ironically is exactly what we are training these cadets to prevent, or start, depending on which instructor you ask after they have had a few drinks. The cadets of Wing 7 were already assembled when I walked in, and the atmosphere was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. 60 of the Coalition's finest stood in formation, and by finest I mean the most genetically gifted, politically connected, and thoroughly convinced of their own superiority specimens you could possibly imagine. There was Zorn Taka, a Haluvian whose crystalline skin could deflect small arms fire. He stood with his arms crossed, looking like he was posing for a recruitment poster. Next to him, Prella Vaughn, a Sarkeesian with enough telepathic ability to give you a headache from across the room. She was already smirking, which meant she was listening to someone's embarrassing thoughts, probably mine. And then there was Dravik Haas. Oh, Dravik. 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 A Thorian standing 2.4 meters tall, built like someone had decided to make a mountain range walk upright and give it an attitude problem. His species evolved on a high-gravity world, which meant his bones were practically durasteel and his muscles could crush a support beam. He had won the Coalition Combat Championships 3 years running in the heavyweight division, and he would tell you about it, frequently, without being asked. The energy in that room was always competitive. That is what happens when you put 60 apex predators in matching uniforms and tell them only the top 10% will get their choice of assignments. But today, there was something extra in the air, a sort of electric tension, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. I found out why soon enough. Instructor Vormund called out Zella Quinn, a Nexian whose species was known for 2 things, exceptional hearing and exceptional gossip mongering. Is it true we are getting a human transfer? There it was. The entire wing shifted. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone in the back row actually laughed out loud, a barking sound that echoed off the reinforced walls. That is correct, Cadet Quinn, I said, keeping my voice level and professional, which is instructor code for I am not getting into this with you people before I have had my morning stimulant. A human? Dravik's voice boomed across the training floor. You mean one of those fragile little things from that backwater gravity well? The ones who break bones from falling down. More laughter. Because apparently casual xenophobia is hilarious when you are young, strong, and have never been punched hard enough to reset your entire worldview. I should have seen it coming. I really should have. She walked in exactly 7 minutes later, and the laughter died like someone had hit a mute button. Not because she was impressive. Oh no! The silence was the kind you get when you are trying very, very hard not to laugh directly in someone's face. Cassidy Reeves stood approximately 1.7 meters tall. For reference, that put her at about chest height to Dravik, and he was not even the tallest cadet in the wing. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight braid, brown skin, and these dark eyes that scanned the room with an expression I could not quite read. Her uniform was standard issue, perfectly pressed, and hung on a frame that looked, well, how do I put this diplomatically? Small, compact, breakable. Humans, I had read in the briefing materials, evolved on a planet with 0.98 standard gravity. Their bones were less dense than most Coalition species. Their muscle structure was adapted for endurance rather than raw power. They had no natural armor, no venomous capabilities, no telepathic defenses. They were, according to the Xenobiology database, remarkably average in nearly every measurable combat metric. Looking at Cassidy Reeves standing in the doorway of Combat Wing 7, I had to agree with the database. She looked like a stiff breeze could knock her over. Cadet Reeves, reporting for assignment to Combat Wing 7, Instructor Vormund, she said. Her voice was clear, steady, and carried none of the nervousness I would have expected from someone walking into a room full of predators who outweighed her by 50 kilos minimum. Welcome to Wing 7, Cadet, I replied, gesturing with my upper right arm to an empty spot in formation. Take your position. She walked past the rows of cadets, and I watched their faces. Zella's expression was pure amusement. Prella was not even trying to hide her smirk. Brunt Kelvar, a Gorvaxian, whose species had retractable claws and really enjoyed using them, whispered something to the cadet next to him that made them both snicker.
And Dravik?
Dravik looked like someone had just handed him a gift-wrapped present with a bow on top. Instructor, he called out, his voice dripping with false concern. Should we perhaps adjust the training regimen? You know, so our new colleague does not get hurt. I would hate for there to be an incident on her first day. More laughter rippled through the formation. Cassidy reached her position and stood at attention, her face expressionless. If she heard Dravik, and she definitely heard Dravik because everyone in a 3-block radius heard Dravik, she gave no indication. The training regimen remains unchanged, Cadet Haas, I said firmly. Cadet Reeves has been cleared for full combat participation by medical and command staff. She will train alongside the rest of you according to standard protocols. Standard protocols, Dravik repeated slowly, like he was tasting the words. Right, standard. I am sure that will go well. Soren Taka leaned over and said something I could not quite hear, but it made 3 nearby cadets crack up. Cassidy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and I saw her hands clench briefly at her sides before relaxing again. Oh, this was going to be a problem. A big messy paperwork generating problem. I had no idea just how right I was. The harassment started before we even made it to the first drill. I had split the wing into sparring groups. Standard warm-up procedure, nothing fancy, light contact, technical work, the kind of thing that keeps cadets sharp without sending anyone to the medical bay before lunch. Cassidy ended up in rotation group 3, which through sheer cosmic comedy included Dravik, Zella and Braun. Of course it did. So, human, Dravik said, stretching his massive arms in a show that was entirely unnecessary and completely deliberate. What exactly do your people contribute to the coalition military? I mean, besides statistics on workplace injury rates, Zella snorted. She was circling the mat like a predator, her scaled skin catching the overhead lights. Come on, Dravik, be fair. Humans are excellent at paperwork, very detail-oriented, great with logistics, I hear. Ah yes, Bront chimed in, flexing his claws in and out with audible clicks. The mighty human administrative core. Truly terrifying. Cassidy was doing stretches, pulling her arms across her chest one at a time, rolling her shoulders. She did not look at any of them. I am here to train, not to debate coalition policy, she said evenly. Oh, she talks, Dravik said with mock surprise. I was worried maybe your species was too fragile for verbal communication. You know, did not want you to strain something. A few cadets from other groups were starting to watch now. This kind of drama was better than breakfast entertainment, and everyone knew it. I should have stepped in. Professionally speaking, I absolutely should have stepped in, but I wanted to see how the human would handle it, call it field research. My species is capable of verbal communication, yes, Cassidy replied, still not making eye contact. She dropped into a lunge, stretching her legs, among other things. Other things, Zella repeated, grinning. Like what? Crying? I read humans leak fluid from their optical organs when they experience emotional distress. Is that true? 'Cause if this is too much for you already, we can get you a tissue or something. Cassidy straightened up and finally looked at them. Her expression was calm, almost bored. We do produce tears, yes. We also produce adrenaline, which increases pain tolerance and reaction time. Useful in combat. You should look it up sometime. Oh, that was a mistake. A beautiful, perfect mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. Dravik's face darkened. Thorians do not like being told to look things up. They prefer to be the ones doing the educating, usually through physical demonstration. Pain tolerance, he said slowly. Right, tell me, how much pain can a human tolerate before those weak little bones of yours snap like twigs? I do not know, Cassidy said. Want to find out? The training wing went very quiet. Bront's eyes widened. Zella actually stopped moving. Even I felt my mandibles click together in surprise. This small, statistically fragile human had just essentially challenged Dravik Haas, three-time coalition combat champion, to test her pain threshold. Either she was incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Possibly both. Dravik stared at her for a long moment, then threw his head back and laughed. It was not a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh that says, I am going to enjoy this way too much. Oh, I like you, human. You have got spirit. Misplaced. Suicidal spirit, but spirit nonetheless. Is that a yes? Cassidy asked. You want to go? Dravik stepped onto the sparring mat, his boots making the reinforced floor shudder slightly. You actually want to spar with me? Right now? Cassidy rolled her neck and I heard something pop. Unless you are all talk, Cadet Haas. Which would be disappointing considering how much of it you do. Zella gasped. Bront made a choking sound. Someone in the back yelled something supportive that I chose to ignore. Dravik's smile disappeared completely. Instructor Vormund, he said, his voice tight and controlled. Permission to engage in supervised combat training with Cadet Reeves. Every eye in the wing turned to me. Fantastic. Just fantastic. I could have said no, should have said no. Any reasonable instructor with a functioning sense of self-preservation and a desire to avoid mountains of incident reports would have absolutely said no. But here is the thing about the Valorian Military Academy. We have rules. Stupid, bureaucratic, carved-in-stone rules that date back to the founding charter. And one of those rules states very clearly that any cadet may challenge any other cadet to supervised combat for the purposes of establishing tactical hierarchy and promoting competitive excellence. In other words, if someone wants to fight, and another someone agrees to fight, and an instructor is present to supervise, then the fight happens. No exceptions. I looked at Cassidy. She met my gaze steadily, waiting. There was no fear there, no hesitation, just a calm, almost eerie certainty that made my training instincts scream warning signals. Very well, I said, already mentally composing the after-action report. Standard sparring rules apply. Full contact. Match continues until submission, incapacitation, or instructor intervention. Medical team to standby positions. The wing erupted. Cadets abandoned their positions and swarmed toward the main combat ring like someone had announced free rations. Within 30 seconds, every cadet in Wing 7 was pressed against the safety barriers, and several instructors from adjacent wings had mysteriously appeared in the observation gallery. Instructor Vex Halloran, a Sarkeesian who ran Wing 4, leaned over the railing. Dex, what are you doing? She called down, her telepathic voice pressing against my consciousness. That human is going to get pulverized. Academy rules, I called back, activating the ring's safety systems. Energy barriers hummed to life, medical sensors went active, and the reinforced floor plating locked into combat configuration. Academy rules are going to get someone killed, muttered Instructor Garth Maul, a Hiluvian with more common sense than most. This is insane, but he did not stop it either. Because rules are rules, and more importantly because every single person in that hall wanted to see what would happen. We are all terrible people. I accept this about myself. The betting started immediately. 20 credits on Dravik, knockout in under 10 seconds, someone shouted. 30 on him breaking something in the first exchange, another voice countered. 50 says the human does not even land a hit, Zorn called out, pulling out his credit chip. I did not hear anyone bet on Cassidy. Not one single cadet. Dravik stepped into the ring and the crowd roared. He raised his arms, soaking in the attention like a thorian-sized sponge of ego and misplaced confidence. He was enjoying this. Of course he was enjoying this. In his mind he was about to teach an uppity human a valuable lesson about knowing her place in the coalition hierarchy. Cassidy entered from the opposite side. No fanfare, no posturing, no acknowledgement of the crowd at all. She just stepped through the barrier and walked to her mark, rolling her shoulders one more time. The size difference was almost comical. Dravik had at least 60 kilos on her and half a meter in height. His reach advantage was enormous. His bone density was triple hers. By every measurable combat metric, this was not a fight. It was going to be a demonstration. Combatants ready, I announced, my voice carrying across the suddenly hushed hall. This is a standard combat exercise. Rules of engagement are in effect. Medical override is active. Dravik cracked his knuckles. All 4 sets of them. Because Thorians have redundant joint systems. Because of course they do. Cassidy just stood there, loose and relaxed. Hands at her sides. Begin, I said, and immediately regretted every life choice that had led me to this exact moment. Dravik did not rush in immediately, which surprised me. He circled instead, hands up in a textbook Thorian combat stance, weight balanced on the balls of his feet despite his size. Say what you want about the cadet, he knew how to fight. 3 championship titles do not lie. Last chance to back out, human, he called across the ring. No shame in admitting you are outmatched. Well, some shame, but less than getting carried out on a stretcher. The crowd laughed. Zella was leaning so far over the barrier I thought she might fall in. Bront had his claws fully extended, practically vibrating with anticipation. Cassidy did not respond. She was doing something strange with her breathing. Long, slow inhales through her nose, exhales through her mouth. Her eyes were half closed, and she was shifting her weight from foot to foot in this odd rhythmic pattern. Is she meditating? Someone in the crowd asked, confused. Maybe it is a human prayer ritual, another voice suggested. You know, asking their gods for a quick death. More laughter. I was starting to really dislike this group. Dravik apparently got tired of waiting. He lunged forward with a jab, testing her range and reaction time. It was a good tactical move. Low commitment, high information gathering. Cassidy slipped it. Just barely. Her head moved maybe 5 centimeters to the left and Dravik's fist sailed past her ear. The laughter stopped. Dravik threw a combination. Jab, cross, hook. Fast for someone his size, proper form. Real power behind them. Any one of those punches could have ended the fight. Cassidy avoided all 3. She did not block them. She just was not there when they arrived. Step back. Lean right. Duck under. Minimal movement. Maximum efficiency. Her face remained completely calm. Stand still, Dravik growled, frustration creeping into his voice. No, Cassidy said simply. And that apparently was the wrong thing to say. Dravik roared and launched a full offensive. Not wild, not sloppy, but aggressive and committed. A proper Thorian assault, designed to overwhelm through superior strength and reach. Punches came in rapid succession, each one capable of denting a bulkhead. The ring's safety sensors were already lighting up, tracking impact vectors and force measurements. Cassidy moved like water, like smoke, like something that should not be possible for a species with her physiological limitations. She bobbed, weaved, slipped, and parried. Her hands came up occasionally, redirecting strikes rather than absorbing them. Her footwork was precise, controlled, almost dance-like in its efficiency. She had not thrown a single strike. She was just not getting hit. And Dravik was starting to tire. I could see it in his breathing, in the slight drop of his rear hand, in the way his combinations were becoming less crisp. Thorians are built for explosive power, not extended cardio. Their muscle fiber composition simply does not support it. It is basic xenophysiology. The crowd was dead silent now. No one was laughing. No one was even talking. They were watching something they did not understand, and it was making them deeply uncomfortable. Fight back, Dravik panted, sweat running down his face. Stop running and fight. Cassidy's eyes opened fully then, and for the first time since entering the ring, she smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who has been waiting very patiently for exactly the right moment. Okay, she said. She stopped moving backward, just planted her feet, set her stance and stood there. Dravik saw the opening and took it, chambering back his right arm for a haymaker that would have knocked her into the next training cycle. Time seemed to slow down. I could see every muscle in Dravik's arm engaging, could see Cassidy's weight shift, her right foot sliding back slightly, her hips rotating, her shoulder dropping. Could see her fist coming around in a tight compact arc, could see it heading directly for Dravik's jaw. And then I could not see anything because the impact generated a shockwave that made the barrier shields flare white. The sound was not a thud. It was not a crack. It was a thunderclap in an enclosed space. A percussion that hit you in the chest and made your ears ring. Dravik Haas, 2.4 meters tall, 140 kilos of Thorian muscle and bone, went down like a demolished building. The silence that followed was absolute. I have seen a lot of knockouts in my 12 cycles as an instructor. I have seen Haluvians drop from nerve strikes. I have seen Gorvaxians go down from blood chokes. I have seen Nexians get concussed by their own reflected telepathic attacks. That is what happens when you put trained fighters in a ring together. Someone wins, someone loses, everyone learns something. But I had never ever seen anything like this. Dravik did not stumble, did not stagger, did not go to one knee first like fighters usually do when they are on their way down. He went completely, instantly, catastrophically unconscious. His eyes rolled back, his legs stopped working, and his entire massive frame just collapsed straight down like someone had cut his power supply. He hit the mat with enough force to make the reinforced plating boom. Dust particles that had been clinging to the energy barriers shook loose and drifted down like snow. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 60 cadets and 4 instructors stood frozen in absolute stunned silence. Cassidy stood over him, her right fist still extended, knuckles facing down. She was breathing hard now, the first sign of real exertion I had seen from her. Slowly, she straightened up and lowered her hand, flexing her fingers once, twice, checking for damage. My brain was trying very hard to process what my eyes had just witnessed. The physics of it made no sense. No sense whatsoever. Cassidy massed maybe 60 kilos. Dravik massed 140. The force required to generate that kind of knockout through thorium bone density and muscle mass should have been impossible for someone her size. Should have been. Medical team to ring 1, I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant and strange. Immediate response required. The medics, credit to their training, snapped into action. 3 of them vaulted the barrier and rushed to Dravik's side. They deployed diagnostic scanners, checked his vitals, started assessing for structural damage. Cassidy stepped back, giving them room to work. She was still breathing hard, but her expression had returned to that same calm neutrality from before, like she had not just done something that should have been biologically impossible. Instructor Vormund called out Medic Tralvas, a Sarkeesian with 2 decades of combat medicine experience. He is alive, unconscious, significant cranial impact trauma, jaw appears to be fractured in 3 places, possible concussion. We need to get him to the medical bay immediately. Fractured jaw, 3 places, through thorium bone structure, from 1 punch, from a human. The medical team activated a grav stretcher and carefully loaded Dravik onto it, his head lolled to the side, completely limp. There was already swelling visible along his jawline, a massive bruise blooming in real time. As they carried him past the barrier, the crowd finally found its voice. It started as a murmur, then built into urgent, overlapping conversations. Everyone was talking at once, trying to explain what they had just seen, trying to make it make sense. Did she just? That is not possible. Thorium bone density is. How did a human? I have got it on recording. Watch, right here. I raised all 4 of my arms. Silence. The wing went quiet again, but it was a different quality of silence now, not stunned. Scared. These cadets had just watched their hierarchy get demolished by someone they had been mocking 5 minutes earlier. I looked at Cassidy. She met my gaze steadily, waiting. There was no triumph in her expression, no gloating, no satisfaction, just that same calm readiness. Cadet Reeves, I said carefully, do you require medical attention? She glanced down at her hand, rotated her wrist, made a fist and released it. No, instructor. I am fine. And where exactly did you learn to punch like that? Earth, instructor. I competed in something called mixed martial arts before my coalition enlistment, welterweight division. 32 professional fights, 29 wins by knockout. The crowd erupted again. Someone shouted something about weight classes. Someone else was arguing about bone density ratios. Zella had both hands pressed to her head like she was having a telepathic migraine. Brunt was staring at Cassidy like she had just sprouted wings and started breathing fire. His claws had retracted completely. Everyone back to your positions, I ordered. Training continues. Now. Nobody moved fast, but they moved. The crowd dispersed slowly. Cadets returning to their assigned groups while casting glances back at the ring. At Cassidy. At the place where Dravik had fallen. Cassidy started to walk back to her position, but I held up one hand. Cadet Reeves. A moment. She stopped and turned back, standing at attention. I approached her, keeping my voice low enough that only she could hear. That punch. You pulled it, did you not? Her eyes flickered with something. Surprise maybe. Or respect. Yes. Instructor. How much? She paused, considering. Maybe 60% power, 70 at most. Did not want to cause permanent damage. 60%. She had fractured a thorium jaw in 3 places with 60% power. Dismissed, cadet, I said quietly. And welcome to Wing 7. She nodded once and walked away. I stood in the empty ring for a long moment, watching the medical bay doors close behind Dravik's stretcher. This was going to change everything. The rest of that training session was, to put it mildly, a disaster. Nobody could focus. Cadets kept stealing glances at Cassidy, who had returned to her drills like nothing unusual had happened. Sparring partners pulled their punches. Training exercises fell apart. Zorntaka actually tripped over his own feet, which should have been impossible for someone with his proprioceptive abilities. I called an early end to the session. Morale was shot. Focus was gone, and I had about 17 different incident reports to file. Plus, I needed answers. I found those answers 3 hours later in the Academy's xenobiology lab, sitting across from Dr. Keth Sullivan, our chief medical researcher. She had pulled up Cassidy's complete physical assessment on a holo display, along with comparative data from the rest of Wing 7. So, I said, gesturing at the screens with 2 of my hands while the other 2 held a data pad and a very strong stimulant beverage. Explain to me how a 60-kilogram human just knocked out a 140-kilogram Thorian with a single punch. Dr. Sullivan, a Krellian like myself but with far more patience for scientific methodology, pulled up a comparative gravity chart. Because we have all been fundamentally misunderstanding what training on a high-gravity world actually does to a species. Earth has 0.98 standard gravity, I said. That is lower than standard, lower than Thoria, lower than Krell. How does that make humans stronger? It does not make them stronger, she corrected. It makes them more efficient. Look at this. She highlighted a section of Cassidy's muscular analysis. Human muscle tissue has an unusually high ratio of fast twitch to slow twitch fibers. Their skeletal structure, while less dense than species from heavy gravity worlds, has exceptional tensile strength. And their nervous system. She pulled up a neural pathway diagram. Their reaction time from stimulus to muscular contraction is faster than 70% of coalition species. I stared at the data, but the database said humans were average in combat metrics. The database measured raw strength, bone density and damage resistance, Dr. Sullivan said. It did not measure kinetic energy transfer, acceleration potential or technical skill application. Vex, do you know what happens when you train to fight in 0.98 gravity and then you fight in 1.02 standard gravity? I blinked. All 6 eyes. The Academy runs at 1.02 standard. Exactly. Cassidy Reeves has spent her entire life training in an environment with 4% less gravity than this facility. That might not sound like much, but when you are talking about acceleration, about the speed at which a fist travels from chamber to impact, she ran a calculation on screen. That 4% becomes a significant advantage in velocity, and velocity squared is a major component of kinetic energy. I set down my beverage before I dropped it. She has been fighting with weighted training her entire life without knowing it. Not just fighting, moving, running, jumping. Every physical action she has ever taken has been against slightly higher resistance than what she experiences here. Her muscles, her tendons, her entire neuromuscular system has adapted to that environment. Dr. Sullivan pulled up footage from the fight, frozen at the moment of impact. And then you add in her training. Mixed martial arts, I said. She mentioned it. 32 professional fights. I looked it up. Human combat sports are, well, brutal. Full contact striking to the head and body. Submissions that can break limbs or cut off blood flow to the brain. Ground fighting. Clinch work. All of it. And they do this for entertainment. She shook her head. Cassidy competed at the highest levels. She has spent years learning how to generate maximum force with minimal telegraphing, proper hip rotation, weight transfer, kinetic chain sequencing, all the technical elements that turn a punch from just muscle contraction into a precision application of physics. I watched the frozen image of Cassidy's fist making contact with Dravik's jaw. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see it. The perfect alignment of her body, the rotation of her hips, the way her rear foot pivoted, the shoulder coming through, every element of her body working in sequence to channel force through one very specific point. She is not stronger than Dravik, I said slowly. She is just better at hitting things. Much better, Dr. Sullivan agreed. And when you combine technical superiority with a gravity advantage, even a small one, you get results like this. She gestured at the medical report on Dravik. 3 fractures. Significant soft tissue damage, and a concussion that will keep him in medical observation for at least 2 days. She said she pulled the punch. Dr. Sullivan's eyes widened. She what? 60% power, she said. Maybe 70. The doctor sat back in her chair processing this. Vex, if she had thrown that punch at full power. I know, I interrupted. I really do not want to think about it. Part 8. Closing. New respect and narrator's reflection. Dravik returned to training 4 days later with a freshly healed jaw. a significantly reduced ego and a newfound appreciation for keeping his mouth shut. He approached Cassidy during morning formation, extended one massive hand, and said simply, "Good fight." She shook it. "You too." And that, apparently, was that. The change in Wing 7 was not immediate, but it was inevitable. Like watching ice melt or watching a sunrise, you could not point to the exact moment it happened. But suddenly everything was different. Zella stopped making comments about human fragility. In fact, she started asking Cassidy questions about Earth combat techniques. Bront retracted his claws permanently around her, which in Gorvaxian body language translates roughly to, "I acknowledge you could absolutely destroy me and I respect that." Zorn Taka, the crystalline show-off who had bet against Cassidy landing a single hit, asked her to help him improve his striking technique. She agreed, and I watched a 2-meter-tall Haluvian get schooled in proper punch mechanics by someone half his mass. Within 2 weeks Cassidy was running training drills. Within a month she was leading them. The betting pool that had been so unanimous against her, it disappeared entirely. Nobody wanted to gamble against the human anymore. Lesson learned. The hard way, which is really the only way lessons stick. As for me, well, I learned something too. Something that should have been obvious from the start but was not, because I am as guilty as anyone else of making assumptions based on database entries and species profiles. Combat is not about size. It is not about bone density or muscle mass or how many arms you have, although I will admit 4 is quite convenient. Combat is about skill, technique, and the willingness to apply both when it matters. It is about understanding physics and leverage and timing. It is about training so hard that your body executes techniques faster than your conscious mind can process them. And humans, those statistically average, relatively fragile primates from a slightly lower gravity world, have apparently been practicing this for their entire evolutionary history. They have been fighting each other constantly in every possible way, refining techniques and passing down knowledge for thousands of generations. We invited them into the coalition because we thought they needed our protection, our superior technology, our advanced combat capabilities. Turns out, maybe we are the ones who have something to learn. Cassidy Reeves walks into my training wing every morning now, braided hair, calm expression, hands that can fracture Thorian bone structure with 60% effort. She nods respectfully, says good morning, takes her position in formation alongside cadets who outweigh her by 50 kilos and do not care anymore because they have seen what she can do. And every single morning, I am reminded of the most important lesson an instructor can learn. Never, ever underestimate someone based on their species profile, especially if that someone is human. Trust me on this one.